Now, constitutional monarchy or not, Australia is popular. People want to live here, and why not? I'm grateful to my forebears every day for their bold move to head down under. After a few years of closed borders during COVID, when most of us couldn't leave the country and immigrants couldn't come in, we're opening the floodgates big time now. We've got labour shortages and our universities have struggled without overseas students, so the government is allowing a record number of people into our country. We're talking about net migration to this country of 400,000 people this year. That's 100,000 more than the peak back in 2009. And it will still be more than 300,000 people next year. Now, these are huge numbers. And even big Australia fans like me have got to be worried about how we can handle this many people so quickly. Let me just put this into perspective. The increase of 400,000 people this year is equivalent to the population of Canberra. We are adding a city the size of the national capital in 1 year. All those homes, all that accommodation, those cars, the transport, electricity and water infrastructure, all the healthcare that we have to provide for those people. Incredible, isn't it? But I mentioned it'll continue next year too, with more than 300,000 immigrants, net terms. Well, that happens to match the size of another city. The port city of Newcastle in New South Wales has a population of just over 300,000. So this is what the facilities and infrastructure to support 300,000 people looks like. So we're adding the equivalent of Canberra this year and Newcastle next year with immigration. This is happening at a time when there's a housing crisis and an energy crisis. Can we really handle this? Let me bring in businessman, adventurer and environmentalist Dick Smith. Dick, good to talk to you again.
Hi, Chris, good to be here.
You've been talking about population problems for a long while.
Yep.
Is this unsustainable?
It is unsustainable. You can't keep doing this forever. And this is the problem I talk about. Look, every Australian family has a population plan. They don't have 20 kids. They have the number of kids they can give a good life to. We should have a plan in Australia saying what's a good number and how do we get to that number. And you're not going to get there by 300, 400,000 a year. We should go back to about 80,000 a year, which will round off our population a bit below 30 million, which I think would be pretty sensible.
Now, we know, of course, the borders were closed off during the pandemic. It was an unusual situation, unprecedented, really. But this has just happened out of the blue. There seems to have been no consultation, no debate. We just read in the papers one day, there's 400,000 people this year.
There's no debate because most Australians are against a big Australia. You mentioned you're for, but most Aussies are against. One of the fantastic things about this country is a lot of wide open space and not too many people. But our cities now are starting to look like cities like Hong Kong, where the schools are high-rise, people live like termites, and the old day of having a backyard that the kids could have a cubby house in, that's going forever.
Yeah, this is the issue, is the changing nature of our cities. What needs to change if we're going to accommodate these sorts of populations?
No.
Do we need to change our planning laws, or do we need to build new cities? Do we need to decentralise? We need more people living in regional towns?
The problem with decentralising, there's not that many jobs in the country towns where everyone says go and live in a country town, but there are no jobs. No, what we should do is have a plan on population, and we shouldn't have such huge amounts. One of the terrible things that happen at the moment is the high rents for poor people. And of course, rent is part of the CPI, and so that's causing the inflation. And when you bring enormous numbers of people coming in, that's obviously going to put up the price of housing and the price of rents.
Well, this is, I think, one of the real issues here, because the government, federally and the state governments, are having to deal with this housing crisis. As you say, it's hard for people to get into the market, but people who don't own a home, who are renting, are really getting hit at the moment. Now, this is going to can only increase that pressure. So you just wonder why we would do this to our economy, because it's people at the bottom end of the economy are going to suffer most.
Look, there's no doubt why we're doing it. It's for the wealthy. It's for the billionaires. They want more money. They've got short circuits in their brains, and they just want more and more money, and they get that by donating to the political parties that support having enormous growth. That's why we've got the growth, because the wealthy make more money. Unfortunately, the poor are going to be less well off, because the wealth of our country is about the same, double the population. Everyone except the wealthy are worth half as much.
Yeah, the real road to wealth is improved productivity. So this is
but that's hard work.
Yeah, exactly. This is the easy way to get economic growth. Just bring more people in, right?
And that's exactly what's happening. Yes, to get people to produce more, which is what bosses should be doing, so their company is more productive. But it's so much easier just to have 400,000 people coming in. That's going to give growth. It's false growth. And in the long term, it's like a Ponzi scheme because you can't do that all the time. One day you've got to stop.
It's a hell of a worry. There are the environmental concerns too, what it changes to our cities, what other land is given up to urbanisation. But there's also the power crisis. We're struggling to make the transition to renewable energy. We're not going to make it the way we're going at the moment. But the more people you come in, the more electricity and energy you need to produce as well.
Absolutely. And it's amazing, not even the Green Party has a population plan. No one's going to talk about it because what they say is, oh, if you talk about population, you've got to talk about immigration. And if you're against immigration, that must mean you're racist. Now, I can tell you, I'm not against immigration. Like you, I come from immigrants. I think it's fantastic, but we should go back to the long-term average of about 70,000 a year. That's made Australia a fantastic place. To have 300,000 or 400,000 a year is madness. We'll never cope.
Well, this is the point you say. I mentioned on Big Australia. That is, I'm ambitious for the country, and I think our population can obviously grow over time. Now, if we're getting 80,000 to 100,000 migrants, as you suggest, our population's still going to grow by that and more, of course, with our natural population expanding anyway. It's a matter of how you manage this and the time frame over which you do it. And I'm just wondering how far out of kilter we are at the moment to have 700,000 or more in 2 years, because simply put, we have not done this before.
No, we've never done it, so it's going to be interesting. I think house prices will be higher and higher, rentals will be higher and higher, and you're going to have poor and poor people. You end up with this great, huge difference between the wealthy and the poor, and that's no good for any country. This is a democracy. Everyone should be assisted, not only the wealthy, the poor should be as well.
And we have full employment at the moment, so at least employment looks prospective for anybody who comes here. But should there be an economic downturn in the near future, we're going to have a hell of a lot of people who we need to look after.
Well, we don't know what's going to happen. We'll see.
We will see. Thanks for coming in, Dick. It's always good to talk to you.